wanna know who I am? Folks call me the Bone Man, ain't my real name, but it's the one that's stuck. Tonight on Requiem Radio, we go back to the Beatles and Charles Manson now. Most folks remember Charles Manson as a killer, a cult leader, a man who hid his madness behind a guitar and a grin. What history tends to forget is that he was also a believer. He believed the Beatles were sending him instructions, that the White Album was a map drawn just for him, pressed into vinyl and shipped straight to his hands. The prosecutors called it delusion. The psychiatrists called it psychosis. But what if something out there in the dark called it a rehearsal? This one is called Helter Skelter. Della had been running her true crime podcast out of a storage unit on the east side of Atlanta for 4 years. In that time, she had received every variety of letter the genre could produce. She had a system. Read once, file by postmark, then move on. The letter from Ruth Freely arrived on a Thursday in late October 2019. Postmark Waycross, Georgia. Ruth's father, Gerald, had been a mailman in Clinch County his whole life. A quiet man, tomato gardener, Methodist. He died of a heart attack at 78, and he had, in March of 1971, received a handwritten letter from Charles Manson himself during his murder trial in Los Angeles. The letter contained no manifesto, no Beatles references, no Helter Skelter, just an address outside Dublin, Georgia, nothing else. Manson's small handwriting on a single sheet of prison stationery, and an address. Gerald had put it in a fireproof lockbox beneath his workbench and never spoken of it for 48 years. He told Ruth about it before he died, and Ruth sent it to Della. Since she was positive this would make a great episode, Della drove to Dublin on a Saturday morning. The address led her off the highway and down narrow roads until gravel gave way to a brick ranch house and a clearing the forest was slowly reclaiming, the gutters choked with pine straw. The driveway heaved and cracked, a realtor's lockbox on the front door, its combination long since findable by anyone who knew how to look. The front rooms were stripped bare, walls marked with the ghost shapes of pictures long removed. She moved through them quickly, her phone light cutting ahead of her until she reached the back of the house and a door that was newer than everything around it. Solid core, recently hung bright hinges. It was unlocked. The room behind it was small, without windows. 3 walls lined floor to ceiling in black fabric tacked with care. And covering every inch of the floor, White Album sleeves by the Beatles. Dozens of them. Blank white faces turned upward toward the ceiling like a field of open eyes. They were not old, not dusty, their corners were crisp, their surfaces clean. Someone had placed them there recently, deliberately, with patience. In the center of the room sat a single folder. Inside the folder, Della found 6 sheets of white paper covered in handwriting she recognized from the photocopies Ruth had sent. Manson's handwriting, small, each letter constructed rather than written. White Album lyrics copied front to back across all 6 pages. No salutation, no signature, just the songs running from one sheet to the next, except for the underlined words. Scattered throughout all 6 pages, 9 words underlined in the same ink. She wrote them down in order, top to bottom, front to back. Number 9 Rocky Market Road, Sadie, Georgia. The address came together in her mind before she'd finished writing at number 9. Rocky Market Road, Sadie, Georgia. She didn't need to look it up, she didn't need to think. She knew it the way you know your own name, because it was her address, the storage unit, the studio, the place she'd been broadcasting for 4 years. She stood in that black-walled room and understood the shape of what had happened to her. These pages weren't 48 years old, the handwriting matched, but this paper was new. Someone had written these lyrics out recently and placed them here, placed the sleeves, prepared the room, and waited for her to come looking. But Manson was dead, wasn't he? Gerald Freely had received a letter in 1971 containing this address. He had put it in a lockbox and never come. Never told a soul until his deathbed. He had understood something about the nature of the invitation that Della had not understood until she was already standing inside it. She put the folder back. She walked out, she drove home. She never made an episode about it. She kept filing her mail by postmark date, kept giving out the studio address to anyone who asked. But she never stood alone in that storage unit after dark without thinking about a windowless room outside Dublin. And the specific horror of realizing that the path she'd walked as her own investigation had been laid out for her in advance. Every step of it, down to the moment she opened a folder and read her own address in a dead man's hand. Gerald Freely had been a wiser person than she was. It only took her one Saturday in Lawrence County to understand why. You've been listening to Requiem Radio, where music bleeds into the supernatural. And that was Helter Skelter. Manson didn't start that chain, he was just the first link. Somebody, or something, finished it 50 years later, in a room built for one specific person who hadn't been born yet when the letter was sent. That ain't madness, that's patience. Ain't gonna be no mo tonight. Y'all rest easy, and don't let the dark drive you home.